The last meeting was a discussion with no action.
That's correct.
Is that correct? So we'll dispense with reading of the minutes for that meeting. If we could, then we'll go directly to public speaking. At this point, what we'd like to do is people that are not on the council that would like to address us, if you would keep your comments short. We have a lot of work to do, and we want to hear from lots of council members. But members of the public, if you'd come forward, give us your name, where you live, and any comments that you would like to make. We'd be happy to hear from you. In the back.
For the record, my name is Joseph De Silva. I live at 17 Mountainville Avenue. I understand you will be addressing the charter and the comments of the Common Council. And one comment from the council that I hope you take very seriously. The council was very definitive, and obviously I saw everybody here the evening of the public hearing. The public, every speaker, was against the concept of 4-year terms in the city of Danbury. Take that seriously. That's a significant issue. The state of Vermont, the governor of Vermont, the governor of New Hampshire, the members of Congress, and the mayor of Houston, the 4th largest city in the United States, all serve 2-year terms. Anybody telling you that it is more difficult to be the mayor of Danbury or an elected official in Danbury than it is to be the governor of Vermont, the governor of New Hampshire, a member of Congress, or the mayor of Houston, clearly off the reservation. We don't need it. It's not warranted. It's not necessary. Moreover, as currently proposed, this will result in 1 out of every 4 years there being no election in the city of Danbury. People recall this past fall, we had a huge election, incredible interest, incredible amounts of money, almost $1 billion raised between all the 2 presidential candidates. Many millions more spent by Senate and congressional candidates. Voter turnout was what, 65% nationally? And that was epic, record turnout. That's great, that's fantastic, it was wonderful. That's not what it could be. It's not what it used to be years ago. I'm afraid. And that was for an epic election. Think about what it is in a normal year. When we have 1 out of every 4 years with no election at all, that is going to have a deleterious effect on overall voter turnout in all the other years. Take those comments, take those concerns seriously. Take the fact that nobody came to speak in favor of that, really. A couple people didn't care. Many people spoke against. I think it's very important, it's very significant. We go to the voters, we ask them for their opinion, and ask them to pass on our work. And in Danbury, I think that's a good thing. And by and large, look, since 1965, only 2 incumbents have ever lost the mayor's race. Danbury's re-elected its incumbents. There's no issue with not being able to get your program through, but it's better to go back to them more frequently. I think that was the only real significant comment I had tonight. The rest, I think, other members will address. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other members of the public that would like to address us. Mr. Brook?
Joel O'Brook, Cannondale Drive. I just wanted to remind everybody here in the room that there was a 17-1, or as somebody reported, 16-2 vote in order to remove the 7-8 text changes, and that your counsel, Attorney Gottschalk, had mentioned that he suggested to you that that also be removed because there was not a scientific way to make that assessment the way they said it was. And this meeting is apparently the 5th or 6th time that we go over the same thing, so I'm sorry I have to say my part the 5th or 6th time to remind whoever's in the room who wasn't here before. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Waller?
Yes. I just wanted to mention that I hope you listen to the council. I believe that they voted against the 4-year term as well. And I also am still concerned about the amount of money you are allowing to go out in bonding. As I remember, you were told months ago that even with inflation, the amount should be only $1,500,000, and I don't know what the cap should be, but anything over that, I personally think the public should have the right to vote on, because we're paying the bills. So thank you very much for all your work again.
All right, thank you very much. Any other members of the public that would like to address us? Yes.
Yes, Dave Bonin, 29 9th Avenue, Danbury. I was against the wording of town clerk to administrative assistant to the mayor. Is that the correct title it is from the top of my head?
No.
Legislative assistant.
To the mayor, is that correct? Okay, to the council. It doesn't sit right with me, just because it feels like town clerk is always the mainstay of, when you think of like an old-timey kind of town, or the people go to the town clerk, it always just feels like more of a representative of the body as a whole, of people who can go to a certain person and get their stuff taken care of. When it's turned into legislative assistant, or it feels more sort of governmental in a way. It feels like beholden to the wrong person. It feels like it's, to the council, to the mayor, it's maybe a lackey of someone else. It just feels more homely when it's called the town clerk. That's just personal preference.
Just clarification, we are changing the city clerk title.
City clerk. Okay, right.
We are the town clerk is still going to be the town clerk,
Okay.
as long as we're trying to do is solve the confusion that those two titles create.
Okay.
So, but thank you. Any other members of the public? Yes.
Christine Counselor, 870 Danbury. I just want to echo what Mr. Waller said. Please listen to the recommendations of the council. They deliberated and worked hard to come to these recommendations, not just
Okay. Thank you very much. Other members of the public? Okay, seeing none, we will then turn to our agenda. Mr. Gottschalk, would you want to give us a summary of what this meeting is by law and how it will work, and the next steps as we finish this process?
I'd be delighted to do that. You know that the Common Council held a public hearing, and then subsequent to that event, made recommendations to you. By statute, what you must do now is to confer with the Common Council with respect to those recommendations. So that section of the statutes limits the scope of what you need to do, and although it's not entirely clear what confer means, I think you have, sitting behind me, a large group of council members, and what you should now do, in my opinion, is to seek their input with respect to those recommendations that were made to you by the full council. Allow them to clarify any ambiguities that remain in your mind with respect to those recommendations, and then decide amongst yourselves whether you are inclined to approve or reject those recommendations. And then, within 30 days of that vote by the Common Council to make those recommendations, which I believe is on February 17th, you are obliged to present your final report with respect to all of the charter changes that you want to see presented to the council.
Okay, so within 30 days.
Yeah.
And Mr. Cavo, you have a committee of the council?
The leadership committee is here, except for Mrs. Teichel, who's ill tonight, and she sends her over.
Okay.
But we have Majority Leader Councilman Seabury, we have Minority Leader Mr. Shadi, we have Legislative Leader Mr. Esposito, and myself as Council President here tonight.
Okay. If we could do this, I would be happy to open this up so that all members of the council could address us.
Absolutely.
And what we'll try to do is keep this as open and freewheeling as we can. Please, council members, understand that I try people's souls because I let people go on and on. So I would ask that as you speak to us, try to keep your comments short so that we can hear from as many people as possible, and maybe keep my fellow commissioners from getting agitated with me once again. So having said that, we would like to hear from everybody who's on the council, and try to keep it as open as possible. We'll have as much back and forth as we can, not going through the chair if we can possibly do that. Okay, we're limited, as I understand it, to 6 basic questions that came back to us from the council. So number one, we met over a 16-month period, and almost all of our work was accepted, which we think is a pretty good endorsement of the work that we did. There's 6 issues that you guys have asked us to review, those being, number one, Section 2-2, the length of terms of office for the elected officials. A second issue is public speaking, Section 3-4. Number 3 was acceptance of donations, Section 4-2. The fourth thing is filling interim vacancies, Sections 2-6. Then special assessments, Section 7-8. And the final thing being limits on non-referendum bonding, which is 7-10. So those will be the issues that we're limited to speaking about.
I think there was a 7th one that wasn't on here, and I don't know if it needed to be on here, and that was to change the name of the administrative assistant to the chief of staff.
Right.
Add that?
Do we need a motion to add that to this agenda?
Yes, we do.
Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion's been made, a second. Any discussion? Mr. Gottschalk.
You're not permitted under FOI to expand the scope of your agenda. So now I need to ask you, to what extent the agenda limited you?
In effect, we think we were asked to add one other point of discussion.
Might I see the agenda, please?
Sure. Yes, right here. It was this item.
If you need any help, I've got your list from your last.
It was the chief of staff, was the...
It was
Yeah,
discussed.
is that this list?
This right here.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
accepted it, right?
No, we just talked about it, but they never voted on it.
We never voted on it.
No, actually,
What'd that say?
Wasn't
Yeah,
voted on?
No, we never voted on it. The council voted.
It's
There was
fait
something.
accompli. It was just, one of those things that slipped between the cracks, and it was discussed at the Common Council, and there was a discussion that said that the current administrative assistant was fine with the title. Members of the Common Council, I forget which one or two of them said, can we change it to chief of staff? I don't even know if the council voted on it, quite frankly. I think it was more of a discussion item than a voting item.
Listen, here's the problem. While the statutes dealing with charter revision clearly suggest that you are to act upon the recommendations, accept or reject the recommendations made to you by the Common Council. What you've done by framing your agenda the way you did was to exclude that. And the Freedom of Information Act doesn't allow you to expand the scope of your agenda at a special meeting. So it's entirely possible, as unlikely as it might be, it's entirely possible that someone might be interested in that item and look at that agenda and conclude that it isn't part of your conversation tonight.
Was that passed by the Common Council?
It was passed unanimously by the
By a
council.
vote?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
by unanimous vote.
Unanimous
But I can't imagine anything we've done that is less important than what the mayor's assistant is
I'm going to
called.
suggest something to you, and that is that we have one final meeting remaining that you've scheduled. And frankly, I would be uncomfortable if you left tonight's meeting with a list of proposals that you wanted added to your final report and left it to me to just do it perfectly without meeting to review. So you've got one more meeting, and if you feel the need to evaluate the final recommendation of the Common Council dealing with that job title, do it then. Put it on your agenda.
Perfect.
But are we in violation by not bringing it up before the group tonight?
Okay.
You will be in violation if you do.
if we bring it up.
Okay.
Fine.
I'm glad we straightened that out.
All right, all right. First item, perhaps the most controversial, length of terms of office for elected officials. Could I hear from members of the council? You know where we were on a split vote. Tom, Sadi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the sake of expediency of time, I'm not going to address all 6, but I want to ask some indulgence and latitude, rather than getting up each time and speaking on each different item, to speak on 2 or 3 of the items I'd like to address to the commission.
Do you want discussion back and forth as you do that, or do you want to just go ahead and make your points and...
Whatever the commission wants
Okay.
to do, if you have questions while I'm stating my concerns. With regard to, overall, I want to say that the recommendations of the common council members to this body were overwhelming in their votes. Most of them unanimous, and those that weren't maybe had 1 or 2 detractors. I find it a little hard to swallow some of the comments and to believe some of the comments and commentary that I heard, I think it was last week, from members here, somewhat dismissive of the appointing authority's opinions and recommendations. Now, I understand no final decisions were made. That's what this consultation is for, and that's what your subsequent final report through your council will be to the appointing authority, the common council. But we didn't take those recommendations lightly. We debated them, and that meeting went on for quite some time after a fairly lengthy public hearing where I think 21 or 22 people spoke, almost all in unanimity, in support of those very votes that the common council members took and then made into the recommendations back to this body. The first one being the length of terms of office for public officials. I still cannot conceive of a basis to expand from 2 to 4 years the length of terms of office for elected municipal officials in this city. I have yet to see, either within the record or outside the record, which we can take things from outside the record, of a basis to expand it from 2 to 4 years. I don't buy the learning curve argument. As I said, there are many very successful members of the council, many very successful mayors elected and re-elected time and time again on 2-year terms. Our members of Congress, our state senators, our state legislators, our reps, are all 2 years. If we took the concept, some amorphous concept out there that there is such this learning curve, then let's think about it philosophically. Should we apply it to all the elected officials? Should we lobby the legislature to expand it from 2 to 4 years? I don't see it at this level. The other thing is that, in all candor, I think it's our duty. I don't take it as a burden to run every 2 years, should I choose. You have to go out and see the voters in close proximity to the decision-making process, and not to impugn or in other words disparage the work that our state and federal legislators do. But in all candor, council members and municipal officials, I think, are the closest to their constituents for very good reason. We tax them based on their property. We decide who their police officers are, their other municipal appointees, the potholes, the way they're paved, and the allocation of revenue, just like we discussed last night, grant agencies and things like that. So 2 years is very reasonable. It's not a burden. I don't find it a burden. And in all candor, I think it'd be hard pressed for these public officials to actually say it's a burden to run every 2 years. Would it be easier? Sure, it'd be easier. That's not why we're here. We're not here to make it easier. We're to do the right thing. So I cannot see it going from 2 to 4 years. It simply does not make sense in the context of this city and the success, I think, of public officials as it's been. That coupled with another point, the issue of bonding. If you do have 4-year terms, and if this commission does decide that they don't want to limit bonding based on the recommendation of the council from the $5 million per year down to $2.5 million, you couple a 4-year term with $5 million in bonding, that's $20 million of borrowing on the future that a mayor and a council can do without the voters opining upon it. So they not only do they not get referendum, but they don't get to vote for the elected officials for 4 years who are borrowing all this money. So I think that bonding should be, and consistent with the council members' recommendations, I think it was unanimous actually, maybe one dissenter, should go from the $5 million to $2.5 million per year with a cap per project of $1 million. And then the final issue, although I agree with all the recommendations that the council forwarded on to the commission, but the last one I'll speak on, so not to take up too much time, is the issue of public speaking at council meetings. We of course want public speaking at council meetings. That's the very first thing that happens at every council meeting. The issue is authorized representatives. Now, I understand that the members of the commission discussed what an authorized representative should be, and I think wanted to set somewhat parameters. Someone who may not speak English as a first language, have difficulty communicating, and to have them be able to have somebody speak in their stead or on their behalf. The problem is, if you don't define it in such a way in the charter, by having it the way it currently is in the proposed charter revision recommendations, you open it up. And even though the best intentions may be to have it for very specific circumstances, the way the language reads in the proposed revision would allow anybody from out of town to come in, would allow attorneys, consultants to come in, whoever it may be. Also, how do you determine if someone is actually speaking on behalf of somebody else? Does that person have to be there to say, this is my authorized representative? Do they have to have a letter? Does a letter say that they're not being compensated for their services and being there? One of the things, because we're not a town meeting style of government, the average person actually gets very little opportunity to speak publicly. And this first 30 minutes of the council meeting, expandable without objection currently, is an opportunity to have that sort of flavor of New England town government where your residents, your electors and residents or taxpayers of the city have a chance to address the council on any item on the agenda. I, as an attorney, don't want to see it filled with attorneys that go up there, because we've had that happen before. 2 or 3 have tried to come up and try to argue a case for somebody with a sewer extension or somebody with a development when they had their opportunity in an ad hoc committee. That's not what the public speaking section is for. That is for Danbury residents or taxpayers, and I think it should remain that way. And I support the other recommendations from the council. As I said, it's clear in the minutes, and I'd be more than happy to respond to or address any questions or concerns.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Any questions or comments from Mr. Sy? Tom,
Yes.
Walsh?
Public speaking, you indicated tonight that you thought if we defined what an authorized representative is that your position? Because I noticed you made a motion to completely get rid of authorized representatives.
Yes. Subsequent to the meeting, I did have some discussions with people, and I can see if you're going to define it, the only category, the only parameters I could see making sense is if someone is unable, a resident or a taxpayer of the city, as it currently is in the charter, is unable to speak on their own behalf. They don't speak English, they need a translator, or they have an ailment or disability that prevents them. That would be the only circumstance, if they are unable to speak on their own behalf. But not someone who just simply, well, I can't be there that night, I want to send somebody, or I want somebody from out of town, here's a letter, they're going to read it into the record. You know, that is not what I think conceptually this whole process was for, the public speaking at the beginning. It was to have the residents and taxpayers themselves be able to come up. And also, again, to go back to the issue of what I said before, going through ad hoc committee meetings and public hearings that we've had, and then to have people, have hired consultants, attorneys, developers, whatever, come in and try to advocate again during that 30 minutes and chew that time up and take it away from the public, I think is not the appropriate approach here.
Do we have the ability to change we can only vote on the recommendation as it's been voted on by the Common Council, correct?
You may reject or accept the recommendation. So now you have to look at what the recommendation was. In some instances it was very broad, and in some instances it was very specific.
Like in this case, the motion was to remove the 2 words authorized representative. So it's either that or nothing. We can't take into account a definition or a setting. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stein.
Other questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Tom, the bonding amounts, you feel strongly, what if the terms of office were reduced to 2 years? You would be less offended by the change in the bonding?
But I still think the annual amount should be $2.5 million. I think it takes into consideration the issue of inflation. It addresses, I think, many of the projects that we had some consternation over with the $500,000 bonding limit in the past several years that I've been on and other members have been on the council. The reason I talked about the $5 million in context of the 4 years is just how much more I find it problematic. But I think 2.5 is adequate to address. It's, let's see, current is 500,000. That's debatable among some people.
Right.
But it's a significant increase, $1 million per project. I think that's adequate. And again, it's not an issue. We've got to keep in concept, we're not capping bonding. We're capping bonding without voter approval. So That's our look at it. If a project is needed, then it's put out to the voters.
Well,
Beyond the 2.5.
we are doing that, but we looked at this very long list, the capital plan of the city of Danbury, and it seems like there's quite a few projects that linger on that. And the view after our review of that, and we spent some time on this, was that these matters don't get themselves on a special ballot or a special election for bonding because they wait to be bundled into a package to be presented to the voters. And therefore, these projects are neglected. And so the thought process behind this was that the council, with the mayor, would take up these projects, whether it be the replacement of a roof, and I'm going to use that as an example because I think that's the most realistic example, or a small bridge that needs to be replaced. That was the idea behind our change. And we wanted to leave enough of an amount for non-referendum bonding to enable you to do that, to give you the flexibility to do that on a per-project basis. There was some debate. There was an annual limit put on it. It was a carefully reasoned thought process that went behind this. It wasn't just, let's give the keys to the bonding kingdom to the council and the mayor.
No, and in no way do I think that you want to just give away the bank on that. But talk about roofs, talk about bridges. Yep. There have been bonding packages that specifically had repairs on roofs, repairs on furnaces for schools, Shelter Rock School being one of them. There have been bonding packages, and then even with the $500,000 bonding, repairs on bridges with state reimbursement. Hopefully that keeps happening, notwithstanding some of the current economic situations. So I think, at least from my perspective, and I don't pretend to speak on behalf of other council members with regard to specific dollar amounts, but just with the vote that was here, the minutes are clear, so I think that 2.5 does allow that. And at the same time, to the extent that there are projects that need more money for them individually, or where we need to bundle them together, it should go to the voters. And whether the council or administration may not be bundling them as rigorously as they should and putting them out, well, that's something to look at. I think that that's more likely the approach, coupled with a 5-time increase from 500,000 to 2.5.
I've always concentrated on the 2/3 vote that's needed to be passed to the Common Council. And I've been told by many people that politics just enters into it, that the aisle is split and whatever's the party in power is going to vote right down the line. And it just, is that what happens? Does politics get in the way of critical thinking about projects and borrowing and bonding?
It's politics and everything. To be honest with you, sure there's politics involved, and absolutely, politics can get intermeshed in it. That's why I think it's important to have referendum when it comes to these things. But at the same time, that's not to say that council members are not going to, I think, in all earnest, generally take their duty seriously and contemplate this. But at the same time, we are contemplating going from 500,000 to 5 million a year. That's a tenfold increase.
And you're saying you can't get together enough votes that are going to vote against something like that, so that 2/3 is not going to be within the council?
In all candor, Mr. Commissioner, I can't predict who's going to be in control, who's not, and how the votes are going to go. I think ultimately on this issue, giving a 5-fold increase is adequate for the council and an administration to address inflation and what these smaller bonding packages are intentionally made smaller because the larger package should go to the voters. It's borrowing on the future. We all know the problems we've gotten into as a nation, borrowing. Let's be realistic about it, as well as the state. I mean, let's be realistic about that as well when it comes to bonding. So these are checks and balances. And putting everything, I think, in the hand, not everything, but a large amount like that in the hands of the legislative body, as opposed to the voters, which it historically has been, I think we need a check and a balance. And that check and balance is, I think, going a 5-fold increase, taking inflation into consideration, taking the need for projects. I don't see it.
It just eliminates the need for you guys to discuss it. Let's just put it to referendum.
Well, it doesn't eliminate. We still have to discuss things that are under 2.5. So this is not 100% one way or the other. They're not mutually exclusive.
Mary?
Don't you think that people want to elect you to make decisions and not ask us if it's okay to replace boilers in an elementary school?
That's why I think that we have recommendations as a representative body that we put to you.
Let me answer your question.
These are some of the very decisions.
My point is, I don't want to go out and vote at 7 o'clock at night at Broadview or wherever I go vote to say that, yes, it's okay to spend money to fix the schools. I don't want to be asked. I want to trust you to get the job done.
Let me put this to you then. So you don't want referendum at all. In fact, the packages that have been proposed over the last 10, 15, 20 years have predominantly been school packages for the improvements that you see at Danbury High School, that you see at Rogers Park, that you see at Broadview, for the police station. And people have come out. They have voted. Those are big packages, and they have come out. So I don't understand that.
Decisions that we couldn't have trusted you with?
Well, are you saying then that we should have, that the council should have unlimited authority? To take your logic, let me respond, to take your logic all the way to its conclusion would be that we shouldn't have referendum at all, that there should be unlimited bonding by the council as a representative body. I don't think that's where you want to go.
We did go there for a while.
Well, I certainly hope we don't go there.
So the record shows that. Yes. Mr. King and then Dr. Cronin.
Mr. Sadi?
Yes.
How many referendums have we held on the city budget?
We don't go to referendum.
Why? That's $200 million a year.
Yes, it is.
This process that this commission recommended, while $5 million is nothing to sneeze at, do you realize how long at that limit it would take to fund the entire capital budget?
Absolutely.
How long?
I have an exact response. The one reason, I'll go back to your first premise, the reason that it's not the same, you're comparing apples and oranges, is because the city budget, if it's a balanced budget, which they have been under this administration and previous administrations, is you have revenues coming in, and you have expenditures. We are not borrowing. Borrowing is distinctly different from a revenue and expenditure budget. You're borrowing on the future, you're projecting out a cost that people have to pay down the road. I think that rises to a higher level of public participation than a revenue, a non-deficit revenue and cost-based budget.
Mr. Sadi, where does the funding come to pay back the bonding? From revenues?
Yes, it does.
From the budget. So it's included in the budget. The payment for the bonds are included in the budget.
Yes, they are.
So that's covered. The other thing, to answer the question, it would take 70 years to fund the capital budget, the 5-year plan that this city recommends in its annual budget. 70 years at $5 million. Now, how many of those projects, if you look at that capital budget, and this is what really worried this commission, if you look at the high priority projects, they're pushed out into year 3 and in year 4. And I think, Mr. Swenson's question is the political issue coming in here. We tried to take the political issues out of all of our decisions and address what is the best thing for the city. And we debated this bonding. I personally come up with a different idea completely. I don't support a fixed amount. I'd rather see a flexible amount in there. But we negotiated to a figure that we felt was fair and would allow the administration and the council to do the necessary work for the assets of the city. $5 million is a lot of money. We didn't arrive at some magic formula, unfortunately. So I can really appreciate your input. I can really appreciate your concern. And yes, I do think that the public ought to have a point of view on it. But I make the point of view about the budget. I know it's in the charter that budgets don't go to referendum. But a number of people have made the issue of $20 million if a man is in there for 4 years or a person is in there for 4 years. That is a lot of money, but so is $800 million that never gets public approval except for an election. And the same thing could be said for our bonding. I'm just trying to share the rationale. I'm not trying to lecture you. But that's how we arrived at this thing. We think it's fair, we think it's defensible, and we're kind of hoping that we could work out something with the Common Council that makes sense, that's all.
And I think the 17 members that voted in favor of revisiting this, particularly in light of discussion of 2.5, felt the same way. Let's arrive at something that makes sense.
Right. Dr. Cronin?
Well, basically, I was going to relate to some of the things that Commissioner King said, and many times what ends up at referendum are things that have to be done for safety issues. And I'm not speaking just because I'm on a school site. There are city buildings that have safety things that need to be tended to. And if you're going to keep pushing out and over time, like Mr. King said, that was our worry. that's when we have the discussion.
Well, the safety issue, it's interesting you bring that up. There is a provision that's proposed within the chart to clarify the issue of emergency funding for of health and welfare and safety. So that's in there already, actually. So if there is a safety issue. So
52 places that need emergency at the same
Well,
time.
no, there's difference. Emergency is defined, and cases lay that out, I think, at the state level. That being said, again, it's an issue of where do we draw the line, 500,000, 2.5 million, 5 million. I think we all agree that there should be referendum with bonding. It's a dollar amount. You have the minutes. I don't want to take up more time.
Well, I don't want to feel like you're getting picked on. Just, but I have a question or two.
I chose to pull myself up.
That's, well, that's why you get paid those big bucks.
Yeah, like all these other people that are waiting to speak.
I understand, and I apologize. This has gone on, but this is one of the biggest issues we'll be dealing with tonight. When we looked at this, I think that $500,000 was put in the charter back in the 70s. So even though I can agree with your $2.5 million, it seems to me a $1 million is too low per project. And what brought that home to us was at our last meeting, the mayor came in and he was looking at a school roof repair, not a new school, just a repair that came in at $1.5 million. So it looked to me as though $1 million is still going to be too low. 2.5 may be about right, but do we need more than 1 million just so that it doesn't have to go to referendum to figure out how we're going to go about fixing a roof?
Maybe even a hybrid of the two.
Okay. Fine. How about other council members?
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
I hope you're feeling better.
I gotta go.
Yes, Mr. Seabury.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I dare not approach some of the issues that my colleague Mr. Sadi. I feel that I'm wiser because I'm much older. But I do have to say a couple of things that have entered my concern since last we all met. And the reason they have is because I've spoken to the council people more or less one-on-one in the open air, we'll say. I've spoken to other people that have stopped me and asked me questions about the whole process. And one, sir, to answer your question, can we decide things non-politically? When we go into ad hoc committees on various things, we all go in with different backgrounds. I'm a high school chemistry and physics teacher. I know very little about finance, and I know less about engineering. I know very little about law, so I refer to my friend Les Pinter and Rick Gottschall and Bob Yeaman. I said, how do I do this? And I would go to them and ask them questions. What's our best route to take on this? If it means that we split down the line, Republican versus Democrat, I don't think that's done intentionally. I think that these are the decisions that we've made doing our due diligence and finding out what the answers are so that we can better vote, so that we are representing the constituents of Danbury better. And I also agree that it's not necessary to go for a referendum to repair the furnaces or repair the roofs or this type of thing, that it's our job to make those decisions, and I willingly accept those. And as far as the budget is concerned, I have a lot of regard for you folks, the same way that I do for the attorneys that I just mentioned, the engineering and these guys. You guys, and this is a conversation I had with Councilman Arconti after we left your committee the last time. You folks met for 17 months, and you presented a document, and you worked hours upon hours upon hours. And so I'm now turning to you and say, is this your best recommendation? And so I may now, if given the same choices that we had and we made the votes in the council chambers, I'm not sure I'd make the same votes, because I'm going to refer to you guys and say, you had hours of reflection amongst yourselves. And Mr. King, when you made the comments that you did, I had no idea some of the efforts that you were in, and I simply didn't have the knowledge that you guys had. And so what I'm saying here publicly and amongst the folks that are here is that I respect the decisions that you folks made, and I will also respect them again this time. If amongst yourselves you say, well, maybe it's not the 5 million, maybe it's the 2.5, and maybe it's not the 4 years and it's the 2 years, or you want to keep the 4 years in, well, so be it. And now I'll go back again to my friend Mr. Arconti. Maybe it is the decision of the voters to have the 4 or the 2. put that out into questions. It's a democracy, folks, and that's what we're here for. And, you know, it's now your decision once again to make, and I'm glad it's yours. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other members of the council that would like to address any of these issues? It looks like we've got everything on the table at this point. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Paul?
I'm not going to reinvent the wheel or go through all that's been said this evening. I'm just going to go through a couple of points. I'm against 4-year terms. I don't need to re-explain why. I will take Councilman Sadi's explanation as my own. I run every 2 years. I've been doing that for 10 years. And nobody likes campaigning less than I do. I would love to not have to do it. Speaking purely personally, I would prefer 40-year terms. When I turn 18, I get appointed, and that's good until I'm 65. Speaking as a city official, you know, I got to tell you something. I'm in pretty tight contact with my constituents. I chuckled earlier when a question came up from the body about you know, constituent issues. I have never been called by a constituent to chastise me for not spending enough money. Mr. Otello, I got to tell you something. You didn't spend enough money last week. It's never happened. I get calls because we're spending too much. I get calls because we are essentially in business to extract funds from people against their will. And the only way this process works is if they feel that their representatives are doing it in their best interest, or at least making the attempt. It's the only way that works. And the closer we are to them, the better off they feel and the better the process works. Now, let me just say this. If I was being elected to cure cancer, I might have a 4-year learning curve, or a 10, or a 15. I'm not being elected to do that. I'm being elected to get a stop sign in, to fix a pothole, to fix a leaky roof. And those kinds of things, you know, if you want a stop sign on your intersection and cars are, you know, scaring your 5-year-olds, and you elect me and you don't get your stop sign, you're not going to wait 4 years for another stop sign. It's not, that's beyond reasonable. I could even see in situations where we do a lot of neighborhood work 1-year terms. I mean, I'm not advocating that, but I'm saying that it would not, if you guys came back with a 1-year limit, I would have a hard time arguing against it. I'd say, look, it's really hard to campaign. We shouldn't have to do that. But in terms of, you know, responsiveness to the constituents, a 1-year term wouldn't be a bad thing. 4 years, they're completely unnecessary. And I'd also like to know, who's behind this? Nobody on the council wants 4 years. The only advocates we've heard this evening, or even earlier, have been the advocate to let the voters decide, from people who are also simultaneously saying they don't want to let the voters decide when it comes to bonding limits. I've heard that. I've heard from the same people tonight and also at our last meeting that we shouldn't have to go to referendum, that we should be making those complicated decisions, while they're simultaneously saying that we should be sending this 4-year term revision to the voters. So I don't know who's talking to you about 4-year terms, but you're not hearing it from the council. Maybe it's the mayor.
Well, the council voted 12-7 in favor, so it wasn't.
Right, but I don't remember a lot of council people here telling you to.
We had some people, we had some members come and say we ought to do 4-year terms. The learning curve has really been, I think, overrated.
Yeah.
That came from our meeting with the town clerk, and we realized what it took to become certified. If there's a position in the city, I think we would all agree, the town clerk probably should be a 4-year term. The rest of the learning curve, I don't think that's the issue. I think one of the issues driving the 4-year term was to maybe take some of the politics out of politics. And I understand politics stays in this building, but the longer the decision-making process, I think the less politics can be involved in that, because you don't have to make a decision because I'm running 8 months from now. You get to make a decision because, you know what, I'm not running for another 2 years. So I think that's what we're trying to do, is to see, can we make the city more efficient? We're not a little town anymore. We're a pretty large city, and I think for those of us that voted for it first time through, Peter, I think the thinking was that it might just make it a little bit more manageable and let you guys do more governing and maybe a little bit less running for office and things. But again, split vote here and a bit of a split vote on the council. But you wanted to go on beyond 4-year terms. I think you had some other point, Paul.
Just to respond to that, I don't think that I make decisions watching November. If I make this decision, they're going to throw me out of office. To begin with, we don't get paid here. We're volunteers. And the worst thing about losing an election is the other guy beat you. But simultaneously saying, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. So there is that. You know, when you get finally tossed out or you retire, you're not losing your livelihood, you're not losing your status, you're not losing anything except the obligation that you feel you have to perform.
Okay.
That's all that there is at this level.
Okay.
So when I make decisions, I usually don't put a lot of...
Was there something else that you wanted to hit besides 4-year terms?
Legislative clerk, again, I think that the council should be...
Yeah, we can't even bring that up because it didn't go in, because it did not come back.
The bonding limits.
Yes.
Let me just respond to the roof. This keeps coming up. We've heard it a couple of times. I manage some property, and very often we will split jobs. We'll have to do a job on a building, but we'll break it up in bite-sized chunks. So I would be, if there was an issue with putting a roof, let's say, on Park Avenue School, and the whole thing was going to cost $2.7 million or something like that, I'd say, look, let's do the east side first. That's one project. We'll do the west side shortly thereafter when the east side is done, and we'll do the central section, and figured out how we could break it up into enough sections so it fell below that $1 million cap. With the exception of possibly bridges, which, just to be honest here, I don't think would even fall within the $5 million cap. Most of these jobs, whether it's a HVAC system, the library's having some issues now with their recirculation system, and it's going to be a big deal to cut a hole in the wall to pull the thing out because it was essentially entombed when it was first built in 1970. It's going to cost some money, but you could probably break that up so that it wouldn't hit that $1 million cap. And as somebody who is essentially elected to dispose, the mayor proposes we dispose. It's pretty rare that I am faced with a bill that I have to pay that I can't because the alternative is sending it to hostile voters. I'm always more than willing to put a package together and send it off in November, and the voters are generally more than willing to pass it.
Okay.
And I think they appreciate being given the opportunity to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Rotella? No. Everybody's happy. How about somebody else? Mrs. Diggs?
Oh. 9 minutes. Just.
Peter.
There we go.
All right, all set. Good evening. First of all, I want to say that you've done a remarkable job. I don't know if I could have been in your shoes for what was it, 16 or 17 months, but I just want you to say.
I'll let you do it now.
Okay, no, I don't want to tell. But in any event, I know I was before this body a couple of months ago, and I really spoke in favor of the 4-year terms, only because I'm from the state of West Virginia, and we always have 4-year terms, so I'm accustomed to the 4-year terms. But then 2 weeks ago, sitting on the dais, and we had a public hearing, and I listened to our constituents. Many of the constituents who spoke were from our ward. They were from the 7th Ward. And they spoke against the 4-year term. So I listened very closely, and I was voted by them. And when I went home, I live on Winter Green. Some of my neighbors spoke to me last week and a couple of weeks ago, all in favor of the 2-year term. In all honesty, I don't think a 4-year term will fly, really, in this town. I really don't think that the city of Danbury is ready for a 4-year term. So that was the reason I voted in favor, or I voted against the 4-year term. What I'm hearing from my constituents is that people want change, and they want that change every other year. So I certainly support that 2-year term. I don't have any other issues, and I know I can't speak on the issue that I'm really totally against. I'm in favor of all the others, but I just have a concern about the can I ask you about the process? This will not, in terms of the charter, will this, after it passes, who will actually pass this? And once it passes, will it become the Bible of the city?
Yes. Correct me if I'm wrong. In the election in 2011, it will be put before the voters, assuming council approves.
No, 2011, this year.
Oh, I'm sorry. So it would be effective You know what, Mr. Gottschalk, would you handle that question?
Something changed since last discussion.
I had it right a couple of weeks ago.
Don't worry, it probably changed since the last discussion.
The commission will present a final report to you. It will contain, as you know, a whole list of changes.
Okay.
Some of them tiny, some of them dramatic. The council will have to vote within 15 days after receiving that final report.
This year.
This year, within 15 days, shortly, coming up.
Special meeting.
And a special meeting.
Oh,
And
gosh.
at that special meeting, you will have a number of assignments ahead of you with respect to this final report. First thing you'll need to do is decide what changes you want to pitch and what ones you want to keep.
So my adamant change that I can't speak on tonight, I can speak on it at the special session.
You
Is
can
that
vote
right?
to reject that change, whatever that change is, yes.
Okay.
And if that particular change is voted down, what theoretically could happen, according to the statute, is a petition can be signed, if enough signatures are obtained, to bring it back.
To bring back to who?
Ultimately, the ones that are petitioned to be brought back and the ones that you approve are going to go to the voters. And you have to do that within the voters have to get their say within 15 months. In all likelihood, at least my guess is, that the council will vote to send this to the voters, to the electors, next November in 2009.
Okay. And we will have the opportunity at that special meeting to kind of tweak some of this, since we have to live with this for the next 10 years.
You will
Is
have
that
two choices with respect to each change.
Each
to
change.
accept or reject the change.
Okay, okay.
You will then have one other responsibility, and that is to determine whether or not this group of things that you've approved, together with ones that might have been petitioned to be added back after you rejected them, you will have to vote whether those appear on the ballot in one or more questions. So, for example, if you thought, if the commission decided to retain their recommendation in the final report to make terms of office 4 years long, you might decide that rather than risking all of the work, most of which you favor, you want to split that out into a separate question and let the public decide to vote it up or down, independent of what happens to the rest of it. You could do the same thing with respect to bonding. So those are two that come to mind. So you could have one question, two questions, or a separate question for each amendment. I don't think you're going to do that, but you could. And then there are some housekeeping things you'll have to decide with respect that relate to that election question, a group of questions. But essentially, that's what you're going to need to do.
Okay. So you will be hearing from the Common Council as a whole in a few more weeks. So then that's when we can really speak on some other issues. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Once the commission sends its final report, they are going to all retire and enjoy the glory.
But then that's in a few more months, correct?
That's March 17th or before.
You know that thing?
Thank you.
Hope that clarified.
Tom, thank you.
Mr. Kern?
Yeah, I just have one short statement to make, because I think I was the only councilor that night that voted no on the 2.5 million as the limit on the bond. And the reason being is, as being the head of the fire department for the short time that I was, I can foresee a situation, it would be a bad situation, but I can see a situation where we would need over $2.5 million right away. A bad fire where a building comes down on a couple of pieces of apparatus. Apparatus is real expensive nowadays. You can't get a ladder truck for under $1 million. And you could need it right away. You can't wait till November for a vote on the bond issue. So to me, 2.5 is way too low.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments regarding that? How about other council members? Yes. Ben?
I just want to follow up on some other things regarding, again, the 4-year term. I've been sitting here and I was listening to a lot of the comments, and I still haven't gotten a full sense of why we needed a 4-year term. I know you mentioned the town clerk is a learning curve, and I think the other half is for the other council members is that you want to take the political thing out of it. But if you look at it, by making it a 4-year term, you can actually making it more political. Because now, every 4 years, these seats almost could be said to be more valuable, which means you'd be more political in order to obtain a majority amongst the council. So you can actually have more money spent to either maintain that seat or to go out and to get seats that you didn't have before. I mean, to have a majority on this council is gold. 14 seats can almost mean you can almost rule the city with those 14 seats. When the current administration, the first term there was a Democratic council, Republican mayor, and you can ask him what that felt like. Things that he wanted to propose got rejected. And then when it turned the other way, the things that he proposed got accepted. So the fear, the sense would be to have that majority at all costs. And having it every 4 years makes it even more important. So if every 2 years, at least there was an opportunity from either party to have a chance to obtain that majority. Because as far as I can remember, we never had a balanced council, 11-10. Unless Councilman Weeby or Tom, I can remember when that ever happened.
1987, yeah.
1987. Okay, so you're talking a long time ago, so the sense would be that, will that ever happen again? May or may not. So the key here, what we have to see is what the future is going to hold. So are we willing to gamble on a 4-year term, given the fact that once it's elected, there's no way of turning back. We can't remove a member, and that's the big issue here, is you can get someone who may never show up for a seat, which has happened before. A person got elected and never attended a single council meeting. Could that happen? Absolutely. Could we do anything about it? No. So how do we address that? You know, so that, and if it does happen, at least in 2 years, you can replace that person. So there's a lot of things that still need to be done for a 4-year term to be accepted. I think the state needs to step in to give the municipalities some leeway to address certain conditions that could happen. They don't exist.
Right. Okay.
You know, a lot of places that have the 4-year terms, the towns, are more of a, again, that's a town-style government where the people have the say. Well, we don't have that here. It's a legislative style, which means the council is very important. This day, if the mayor, something happens to the mayor, we have that addressed. The council president steps up, or there's a special election. But we don't have that for a council who never shows. So it's, again, it's important, I mean, that we address these concerns before we go into a 4-year term. You know, when I first heard it, I was saying, wow, 4 years, I thought it was a good thing to have. But when you start looking into it, what could go wrong, I started changing my mind. Could a 4-year term work here? It could. But is now the time? No. I think that's important that we address that.
I don't know if I understand. You're saying that it would only be, a 4-year term would only be good if we would assure you that it would be a 10-11 split?
No.
I don't understand.
But what I'm saying is we don't, the fact that to have a majority on the council is very important for the parties to obtain, which means they will invest a lot into to have that, a lot of money, to achieve that. So you can have a lot more money being spent for council seats where you never had before. I mean, most of the people who run for council don't spend more than $1,000. Because if you go over 1,000, you got to form committees. But by you having a 4-year term, what you can be inviting are more committees for council seats where you never had before. Because these seats are now much important, because now they're for 4 years. So have a majority for 4 years instead of a 2-year term That's a lot. Until you're on this council and realize what does it mean to have that majority. So I think to have the voters a chance to have that choice every 2 years means a lot. Unless, of course, there's the provisions to protect the public in case something happens, and it doesn't exist.
Right, and you know, we looked into that. State law does not give us the ability to put in impeachment proceedings and things like that. It doesn't exist for the mayor or council.
Doesn't have it. So I think the step that we should do is go on the state level, have them make these recommendations become law, and then bring that down to the local level. It just doesn't exist. And I think that's important. So again, I think a 2-year at this point is still a bit to go. And I did, like many people here tonight, I haven't heard anybody says that we need 4 years. I haven't heard it. And I heard from a lot of prominent people in this city says they don't want to see it at this time.
Okay.
On the bonding, I just want to mention on the bonding things, I think we do need the cap. 5 million appears to be too much at this time. But I do agree we may possibly, as a compromise, some type of phasing. Maybe $1 million is okay now, but it may not be 3 years from now, 4 years from now. So I think one of our recommendations from us to the council, to this commission, would be to look at it again. I don't think we necessarily gave them actual parameters to which to vote on, correct? I think we just sent it back for their consideration.
You discussed $1 million per project, 2.5 per year.
It wasn't exactly a record. It was just
It was referred back.
referred back. So you kind of have a leeway to come back to us with some type of compromise. So I know Commissioner King said some type of phase-in. So maybe a CPI index over time.
I like it. Please don't go there.
But I'm saying, with council approval, you could start out at $1 million and have it, looked at.
I don't want you.
4 years from 2 years from now, have it indexed to another level. And you can decide whether it be the current CPI at that level. So it can go from 1.4 to 1.2, 2 years from now.
Okay.
And then have a ceiling.
Yeah.
5 million ceiling over the 10-year mark, or something along those lines. That's more of a compromise, if you feel the $1 million is too low, or the 2.5. So I think we need to go to
other issues you wanted to cover, Ben?
Just the one more issue, I guess, is beyond the appointments, when a council person does resign. That was one of the issues to bring up as well. Again, the 60 days to submit it, and I think we have, our corporation council gave us a letter that says if the person is not appointed within 60 days, it becomes vacant. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think we got a letter from the corporation council that almost kind of leans in that direction.
Wait, you're saying that if we put the word submitted in, and if...
Well, I think that's the question on hand. I think the question becomes, is the problem we have is, once the person submits the letter, the council still has the right to send the person to ad hoc. So the problem becomes if it's the 59th day, the letter gets submitted, and it says, well, I want to send it ad hoc, which now brings the appointment beyond that 60-day limit. What happens? Now, we were told that once you pass, there's a potential that that seat becomes vacant for the remaining of the term. I don't know if that's...
That's state law, you're saying?
No, I think that's an interpretation.
I mean, just so you know, what we did is, the current wording is 40 days, which wasn't enough time, depending on when the person resigned. We thought by increasing it to 60 that we would solve that problem. Are you saying that's still not enough time?
No, the problem doesn't. The problem that exists before still exists. The problem is to send it to an ad hoc at the 59th day.
We removed that.
I mean, unless you can hear from
wording. I think that's what's confusing.
But we removed the words, because there was wording that said that it would remain vacant or until the next biennial municipal election. We removed those words so that it doesn't have to stay vacant unless there's some overriding
But the issue becomes what happens. What happens 60 days, it's the 59th day, it's on the agenda to be approved or not, whatever, and a council person says, I want to send it to ad hoc. So now the 59th day becomes another 30 days, because the next council 30 days later, it now becomes 89 days. What happens? We're in violation of the charter because we didn't fill it within the 60-day term. So the question becomes, again, the question is to avoid that from happening. What do we do? The charter doesn't address that. And I think that was the concern that we've had, why we sent it back. What happens?
Isn't it specific that it says 60 days, that it should be filled within 60 days?
But any council member has...
There are no provisions for penalties in the charter now, or
that's what I'm saying, is what happens, because a council member has a right to send any item on the agenda to ad hoc. What happens if by sending it to an ad hoc violates the charter? The charter is silent on that issue.
We, quite frankly, had trouble coming up with. Mr. Levy, did you want to add?
Currently, just a little background, currently in the council rules, all items on the agenda automatically go to an ad hoc committee unless there's unanimous consent. So I think what Mr. Ben is saying is that, what if you go to the 60 days and it comes up on the agenda,
one person wants to send it to
one person wants to send it to the agenda, what happens after that? The charter is silent.
Now, you could very well say just no ad hoc. You can just plainly say that the item shall not be sent to ad hoc, it shall be discussed on the floor. That you addressed it. I mean, it's something along those lines. The charter needs to have a say in saying what happens if.
Now, if we changed one word, here, our language says it shall be filled within 60 days. If we change that to submitted within 60 days, then it starts your you can send it to ad hoc. It would still have to come out of ad hoc.
That's a good solution.
That would work.
That
It would work for me.
So again, you have to talk to your corporation counsel to see, will that avoid any charter violations? I would think it could. The shall, the may.
Must be submitted instead of filled.
Or just have that there be no ad hoc provision in this, something along those lines. So you can debate it.
Submitted is better.
Might as well move it back to
Instead of
40.
say that.
Yeah, you
can move
could
it back
do
to
that.
40.
Yeah, you could bring it back to 40, because that, seriously.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
60 days is, you're putting 60, can I speak?
Yeah, please.
Okay. You're putting 60 days in there because the town committee head has to come up with a palatable appointment.
Yeah.
And before they do, they have a pretty good idea where the council is on this, and that can take 30 days, particularly if it was like a sort of an unknown transfer, the guy has to move out of town rapidly. We weren't really thinking of a backup player. If all we have to do is submit a name, and that name can then get digested in the system, because very often the shock is not with the person, it's with the name. You need a week or two to mull it over and that kind of thing. You could easily submit in 40 and leave open-ended seating, and that would work. An alternative, this would make the language a little more complicated, is to appoint in 60, but add 30 days if it had to go to committee. You could do that too.
Mr. Gottschalk, you look troubled by this? Or you're okay?
Is it like you can't do it?
Or why have a day limit at all? Why have days?
Well, we don't want vacancies to exist forever and ever, Ben.
But
what we want to do is be...
But again, it's only be to the next election. But who will be at the fault? It'll be that party who has the vacancy.
Well, it's the citizens too. It's not just the
We don't want to
party.
leave.
It's the citizens.
We discussed this, and we didn't want to leave wards uncovered.
Or give the council, because that fills the 90 days, the council will have right to fill in wherever they want.
Mr. Gottschalk?
Or something.
The reason you have any language at all is to encourage the common council to fill vacancies. So any decision or any opinion rendered by the corporation council that suggests that the result of a failure to meet this deadline causes a permanent vacancy is, I will tell you, curious.
They did
it.
They did it.
They did.
Please,
And we were very curious.
please.
What troubles people is the use of the word shall in this sentence. Case law in the state of Connecticut tells us that the use of the word shall can mean one of two things. It can mean a mandatory provision or a directory provision. We all know what a mandatory provision is. A directory provision is a provision that expresses a desire, but is not mandatory. It's a direction being given to, usually, to government to do the right thing. I would recommend that you not change language to me from shall to act on a proposal within any period of time to a provision that says somebody other than the Common Council will submit a name, because there's no support anywhere except in custom for a required submission. Filling vacancies by the Common Council is their job. If they choose to get outside advice, that's fine, but they're not required to. So my advice to you is to pick a time frame that you think is appropriate and give it to the Common Council. I will say one more thing. You know that there's language in there that goes beyond the expression of a time frame, 40 days or 60 days, and talks about an election. And that seems to be the language that led to this opinion by the Corporation Counsel's Office. You've stricken that language, or strucken it if you choose. It was language that didn't belong in this charter to begin with, because it only applied, if you read it carefully and correctly, it only applied to 4-year terms, which we don't have any of. So, I think the issue that's causing the upset is going to be resolved by striking that language in the first place. And then what's left is just coming up with a fair amount of time. There's nothing to prevent somebody from sending a proposed appointment to a committee and having it sit there forever, unless you have some language that at least expresses a direction that the council will do the right thing and vote on vacancies and fill them within some period of time, in my opinion.
To the question, what if they don't?
Then there's a vacancy. And
So it goes back to the council to resolve it.
I'm sorry?
Then it's up to the council to resolve it, right?
It's their body. It's always up to the council to resolve it, yes.
It's their body.
So the wording that we've recommended should satisfy what Mr. Chinese is saying. What happens? It goes back to the council to resolve. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
We've given them the direction, and they've chosen not to, and I think the word filled should remain for that reason.
But again, I just want to follow up. If it goes to a committee, and the committee chair never calls the committee meeting, 4-year term, that seat can be vacant for 4 years.
No, that language is taken out.
If an appointment goes to a committee, it's up to the committee chair to call the committee. So if that committee chair never, 4-year terms, never calls the committee to discuss the appointment, then the seat will remain vacant until the next election.
Isn't a commission, and let me direct it to you, the president of the council, isn't a commission required to report back to the committee of a whole as to the status of what they've been assigned?
No.
We have ad hocs that have been never met for 3 or 4 years. We called them and never met.
There's a requirement to report back in 60 days. The mayor, at the end of every council meeting, will say the key words, "I'm extending all committees." That covers the reporting back.
I can just speak, we think when we put these things together, that you're going to act in good faith.
Right.
If this
is a political environment.
That's why, I mean, I know I sound naive because politics, it just seems to me that at some point, someone has to decide that I'm not going to be a Democrat, that I'm not going to be a Republican, I'm not going to be a Green Party, I'm just going to be a council person, and I'm going to try to act in the best interest of
a perfect world.
I understand it's naive, I understand, but you know what? That's one of the reasons I think we're in the predicament that we
But
are.
we have the opportunity to prevent that, and that's what
But
to fix it now. Even though you put in there, they must report back within a certain time frame to avoid any potential future problems.
All we can do is tell you what the right thing to do is. Whether you choose to do it is up to you. It's your body.
But I see Mr. Cheney's point. If you take a council that is nearly equally divided, and you could have a swing of one vote changing the majority on a council, the majority party could send it to an ad hoc committee, and it's down in the bowels of the operation forever and ever. That doesn't seem, I don't think this ought to fix that. The rules of the common council should address that, and why you would allow that to happen is beyond me.
Why are we doing this chart?
Mr. Gottschalk and then Mary Cronin.
I think Mary ought to go first. But
I would just like to, I'm sorry. I'd just like to echo Paul's sentiments. We thought we were up here giving you a document to make your jobs easier, and clearly, I don't think we accomplished that. We thought we were, giving you tools to get the job done.
But you can see how the tools can actually go both ways. They can use that tool to my advantage, and that's not what the charter.
In your 11-10 council, I could understand that.
That could happen.
In an 11-10 council, it's very important that I don't let my committee ever meet so that I maintain my majority. That's what you're saying, Ben. Mr. Gottschalk.
the problem that you were trying to grapple with was that in spite of the best intentions, sometimes 40 days is a difficult number to accomplish. What you did was give the Common Council the tools to do their job by proposing 60 days. 60 days is a reasonable period of time. Perhaps you should have the conversation about 90 days. But there is a reasonable period of time that you could probably all agree on. To add language saying, and the committee, if one is appointed, shall report back within 30 days, just adds one more requirement that could be disregarded. If they're going to disregard the 60, what stops them from disregarding the next phrase in the sentence?
Okay. Mr. Buzet, did you have
a question?
Yeah. One of the things we did find as we were going through this is lots of things we made better. We don't think we got everything perfectly set. What we did is an improvement, but I'm not so sure that the charter should have so much restrictive language that people are going to jail because they didn't get their committee meeting done by a Tuesday afternoon. It's just, I guess what we tried to do is say there was a problem. We've certainly made it better. How do we make it perfect, I think might be beyond us at this point.
Again, that's why I'm bringing this up for your discussion to see if you could make it a little stronger.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments on this specific?
Yeah, if I may, we have been laboring, as Attorney Gottschalk alluded to earlier, we've been laboring under an opinion that seems to suggest the remedy for not making the appointment is to disenfranchise an entire group of people by essentially stopping a seating. I took issue with that at the time. I still take issue with that ruling, and I don't know who's right, whether it's Riddick or Les or whatever, but it would seem to me that a state court or even a federal Supreme Court would be hard-pressed to find disenfranchising a remedy for this kind of thing. But I never really thought if push came to shove and it actually went to court, if there was a mandamus filed or something like that, that they would say, yep, you're right, you missed the deadline, so the entire Fifth Ward is going to have no representation for the next 3 years, because it just seems a little, over the top. If maybe what Corporation Council can do is to revisit that ruling, and I think that if it turns out that ruling was a little premature, I think we on the council would be, I would anyway, a lot more amenable to accepting just a straight 60-day seating with no other language in there. As we know, the charter is filled with stipulations without penalty. They're all over the place. I mean, if I could sit there, you guys have been through this document, but every single paragraph is telling you to do something, but there's nothing that at the next line that tells you what's going to happen if you don't do that. The implication is if you want to do something, you have to do it this way, and if you don't do it this way, you can't do it. But it doesn't say that. That's just an implication. So we had a ruling that said, yeah, you guys missed, if you go to committee on this, you missed the deadline, you'll never be able able to seat that person, so we got all excited, and we dropped the committee thing, and we put them right in. I don't want to, make a point of the particular appointment, but if the case is, if that's not the case, if we can simply take this language as it is intended, which is a strong suggestion to get off our butts and make an appointment, that's fine. And if we miss the deadline, we'll just come back a month later and roll up our sleeves and get ready to do it. But this idea that if we miss that deadline, we can't go back 4 years until the next election means you better stretch that out, because we're going to need the time.
And what we clearly did is we're trying not to disenfranchise anybody. Exactly. The one thing we try to do is to keep the process open. So we're not perfect, but it might be about as fixed as we can make it at this point, unless there's better ideas.
That works for me. The present language works for me if we're not going to disenfranchise them.
And we did pull that language out. Other comments from Mr. Cabo?
One possible solution might be just to change the language to 90 days. The position would be filled by 90 days. And that may just be the simplest way to do it. It doesn't have to be message. It should be filled by 90 days. That would give a town committee enough time to vet out a candidate, have a town committee meeting to vote on that candidate, get it to the council, have the council either vote on it or send it to an ad, and then have it come back and be approved at the end of, or before the end of 90 days.
But it doesn't solve the problem of the ad hoc just never calling the meeting, right? That's, what I'm hearing is, if someone wanted to play politics in an unseemly way...
Use the word "must be filled" by 90 days.
Well, if I may, there is a solution when you have a recalcitrant ad hoc. I don't know, Les can speak to this. A majority of council members can overrule the chair and force the ad hoc. There is a provision for that.
A majority of council members,
I don't know if it's 5 or 11 or 18 or 14, whatever it is, but if there's an ad hoc that's never met, and all of a sudden that thing has to meet, and maybe the chair is in the hospital or something, you can push it forward. So
that exists today, Paul?
Les?
That's Rick.
You mean Rick? That's Rick.
Rick. No wonder he wasn't paying any attention.
7 members of the Common Council can demand that a special meeting of the council be called and compel a vote, I suppose, yes.
So you can pull a report up from an ad hoc if 7 members of the council push for a special. I'm leading the body language here.
The problem is that the rules of the Common Council say that except by unanimous consent, no vote shall be taken on any measure until the matter has been referred to a committee for report. So, okay, so you call this special meeting and you bring it back up again. It's a new motion. Still are confronted with the possibility somebody can send it to a committee.
And if you're in the minority, you're not going to get the 2%.
But that's not, fixing that ordinance has been within the purview of the Common Council for 30 years. Nobody ever did it. And maybe it's time to revisit that ordinance. You guys don't do ordinances, so not your job.
Mr. Chairman, I think we can...
All right. Any other questions or comments from anybody else regarding this stuff? All right. Yes.
I don't think Mr. Cabo was finished. He commented on one aspect.
I was going to just present my comments for the same thing.
Okay. Anybody else would like to address us? Mr. Levy.
Can I address you? I thought I used up all my time.
Yes, you're on borrowed time, but go ahead.
Wait a minute, let me start the meter.
I really haven't. I think that I can understand how you labor over these. And, you know, everybody talks about politics and it being such a dirty thing. Okay, out of politics comes good public policy, too. It heavily debates things. It generates the mind how to deal with different issues to satisfy everybody. So I don't think it's as bad as all that. And as far as vacancies are concerned, I think that perhaps you're carving out that language which said it would be an open seat until the next election. It will satisfy in the general direction. Somebody who's going to abuse the language, they're going to find a loophole to do that no matter what. So I think that kind of indicates the direction you want to go, what the commission wants. So I'm in favor of as you presented it and wordsmithed it back. As far as the 4 years, I'm still opposed to 4 years, and it's reinforced by the public hearing. My count was something like 40 people came from the public and spoke against the 4-year term. And I'm primarily against it is because of the fact that you cannot recall public officials. And as I've stated before, the first thing that happens to any of these mayors or any of these individuals, which has happened in our own state, the first thing that comes out of their mouth, as John Rowland said, I will not resign. And that means that the public, right now we're doing that with a mayor in Hartford, and the first words out of his mouth were, I will not resign, I'm going to get my day in court. In the meantime, the public business is put on the back burner, no matter what they say. So 2 years is fine. 4 years would be more convenient for the politicians, but it may not serve the public, and that's what we're here for. Council members don't get paid. They volunteer. And therefore, if they don't want to do the job, don't run for office, and they should be aware of what the community is doing before they get on board and find out how things function before they even run for the office. And if they don't know, then let the voters decide whether they want to put someone that's not very knowledgeable about what's going on in their community into office. And then the public will have to pay the cost of that type of thing. But you run for office, you bang on doors on our level, people ask you questions about your city, you tell them what your opinion is, they tell you what their opinion is, and hopefully you can represent them and do the things that they are telling you to do and get reelected. And 2 years is fine for that. 4 years 2 years has worked in the city of Danbury. Why should we change? I understand that the mold is almost cast that this will go on the ballot in 2 questions. Okay, I understand that that's the direction and the movement of the majority party right now is they're going to throw it out to the voters, and the voters are going to go along with what they hope their leaders are giving them in the right information and saying, well, if that's what you need, I'm going to give it to you. And the public in Danbury has been very generous. As far as the bonding is concerned, we have many, many ways for any mayor to get the needed revenue for any emergency or anything they want to get done. The capital budget wound up to be a wish list. It's a parking space for a department head who wants something very urgently, and the easy way for the mayor to satisfy him and say, I'll put it on the 5-year capital budget. The other thing is, you can't get federal or state funding unless you have something on the capital budget. So you have to put it on there if you want it and you want to get federal or state funding, because it has to be on the 5-year capital project budget. A lot of the items on there, you mentioned roofs. Well, roofs should be an ongoing program. We know roofs have a 20-year life expectancy. So we can plot out, and we have bond issues periodically, every 5, 6 years, or more frequently, every 2 years. You can very easily plot out when a roof is going to need replacing. It's just like roads. We bond roads. Should we give enough money to repair all of the roads that we put in the bond issue? I don't think so. I think that, that's a major item. We can amortize it out over 20 years. That's what we do with bond issues. We put it in our operating budget as debt service payment, and we keep it to a level that's affordable in our operating budget. We spread out the payments. So comparing the two is really not really fair. There's things that should be put into bond issues, and roofs are one of them, and we can do it. We can foresee that a roof has a life expectancy of 20 years. We should be doing those things. So I don't see where we need a huge amount of money. As far as fire trucks, you mentioned fire trucks. Phil, when the Lee Hat factory burnt down, we had 2 fire trucks, engine 23 being one of them, that burnt up. The city went out and got replacement fire trucks. There were lenders, or it takes time to build these things. It takes almost a year to build a fire truck. You can go out and borrow them. Other communities have spares, just like the city of Danbury. We've always found our way through this. We also have emergency appropriations, just like the charter says. If it's really needed, we can go ahead and through an emergency meeting, appropriate the money and do it. And we do, if we have to. So I just don't see where we need that much money. The $500,000 that currently exist, as I remember it, Jimmy Dyer wanted to buy the Palace Theater. And at that time, the mayor could only spend through the council something like $50,000. Consequently, they wanted more money available that they could buy something like the Palace Theater, because Joe DeSilva came along and bought it for $300,000, right under the city's nose. So that's one of the reasons why they raised it. It was never meant to be part of the operating budget. But mayors after that went along and spent the money. As time went on, they incorporated it in their budget and said, we're going to do capital expenditures with it. But it was never put there for that purpose. So I don't, that whether it's 500,000, even at that, this is the first mayor, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, but this is the first mayor that found the loophole to bond $2.5 million using the $500,000 on individual projects. Okay. For 30 years prior to that, no mayor ever did it. So, giving them more money, no. Politicians need less leeway. They need more that they have to work harder for, answer to the public on a regular basis. And I, as a person that's involved and have been involved in the political scene for some time, understand that they don't need more latitude. They need less latitude. And the public has to live up to their responsibility and be active in their community and take part. It's a responsibility as a citizen to be active in your community. And if they just want to sit back at home and say it's too inconvenient for me to come out and vote, then they deserve whatever they get. But it's an obligation to come out and vote. It's an obligation to come out and participate in your community and vote at bond issues and referendums. I haven't missed a one in my entire life. So that's where my opinion is on the issues before you. They haven't really changed. And I think that anything you can do to take away latitudes and make them so that they're more answerable to the common council, to the general public, the better charter we have.
Thank you. Questions? Paul?
I have a tremendous amount of respect for you. Who's the they? Isn't it we?
We are they.
Are you saying you don't have enough self-control that you need more restraints? Is that what you're...
No, I think that in general, as a group, because we do work in a political environment, and we need to keep the balance of powers in such a way that no individuals or no group of individuals can take us in one direction or another, which is extreme. And that, you have to maintain, the minority still needs more power than the majority in order to balance that power.
Other questions?
And when it's they, it's us.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Levy? Just one quick point, again, that 500,000, there is no limit currently in this current charter if you assume that you can do 10 or 15 or 3 or 500,000s. Our proposal does put clear language that does make an annual cap. We're not perfect, but we're certainly, we think, an improvement over what's currently here, because there is clearly an annual cap in this language at this point. But Warren, thank you.
Absolutely correct. And, I also, we got a legal opinion from our bond counsel that was legal to do that. It just had never been done before. And that's all I'm saying is that people look at things and they they expand on them, they embellish on them. And I think we ought to close that by capping it off.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Other members of the council? Mr. Cavo.
Thank you, Mr. Morano. Ladies and gentlemen of the commission, I thank you very much for all of the work that you've done and the time. Could you hold for 1 minute? I need to be perfectly interrupted.
Yeah. You can tell the professional council members, as soon as that beeps, everybody stops.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bazay. I want to thank you all for the time and effort that you've put into this. It seems like a decade ago that I met with you to give you some of my suggestions on some of the things that involve the council. Mr. Gottschalk, thank you to you as well for your time in this. I think you're the only one being compensated for being here all these times and nights, and so you should be for your expertise, and I thank you for that. You know, when I spoke to you back that time about the term limits, I think I spoke to you that I had reservations both ways, and I said that I had reasons why I felt a 4-year term was important, and I had reasons why I felt that a 2-year term was important. I will tell you tonight, standing here, looking at the council committee, the whole minutes, that the motion to keep it a 2-year term came 12-7. That's the will of the council. I think that the reason why your commission was formed was to vet this out and look at it in a broader spectrum than we could at one night's meeting or 2 nights meetings. And I think you did a great job with that, and I'm going to leave that with you on your recommendation on a 2 or 4-year term. It's not one of the issues that I'm going to fall on the sword over. I firmly believe that it should be left to the voters to decide that, and I believe I said that night in the council meeting. The other issue that I wanted to talk to you about was on the bonding. When we were here last week, the mayor had spoken to you about a roof on the school building with $1.2 million, and that's without any engineering costs going into that. So it easily could go up to, $1.3 million. I think $1 million is far too low. I think that there's a possibility that maybe an agreement could be reached where maybe we have a $2.5 million annual cap, period, and leave it at that. If a project comes up that's, $1.8 million, it can be done, but you can't exceed more than 2.5 in any given year without going to the voters. So that may be something I need to throw another suggestion into you. The $5 million cap, I understand the concerns of my fellow council people here tonight, but I think that there is a checks and balance in place, and I think the council is that check and balance. And if the commission feels strongly on the air investigation that it should be an annual cap of 5 with a 2.5 million per item, then that should be what your recommendation should be to the council, and then we'll vet it out from there. And the only other thing I had was about the vacancy position, and I had already spoken to you about that. So again, I thank you for your time, and I thank you for your efforts in this. And we will see you in probably another 15 days.
Sounds great. Thank you. Questions or comments, anybody? Mr. Cavo, thank you. Mr. Gottschalk, what's our next step?
I think you have some votes to take and some conversations to have about the recommendations that were made to you by the council.
And are our choices that we accept theirs, or it's a choice between our language, their language? Can we allowed to change any of the language? So that if we wanted to change the numbers in the bonding, for instance, can we change those numbers?
The answer to that question lies in the form of the recommendation.
And
it was referred back open-ended on that one.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I ask a question to Attorney Gottschalk?
This will be your last one, Paul, sure.
It's actually more of a point of order. They have a time limit to finish what they're doing. I think we arrived at, March 17th?
30 days. From the recommendation.
Let's call it line 7, whatever it is. Whatever it is. Then how much time does the council have?
15 days.
Go through. The clock starts ticking at the last of the 30 days, or the clock starts ticking when they give us the report?
The clock starts ticking when you have the final report.
So if they jump the gun, give it to us next Monday, then the clock is going to start ticking, and we have to bring this back by the April meeting, like the latest. But if they come in towards the end of the month, then we would have, well, that 15 days is when they give it to us.
So are you recommending that we not take action tonight to buy time, or that?
No, we just referred
No,
back
are you addressing me? No, I wasn't making a recommendation, just for my own edification. I actually thought we had to meet again Monday night for a special council meeting to go over this matter.
All right. If that's the case, let's take these things, and I think if you will allow me, let's do some things that might be a little bit easier first. So I'm inclined to do number 2 first, which is public speaking at council meetings, section 3-4. And on that, the council asked us to remove language, the authorized representative language, passed by unanimous vote of the council. Can I have a motion on that?
I move that we delete the language regarding authorized representative from our proposed changes to the charter.
Okay, motion's been made. A second?
Second.
And seconded that we would delete the language authorized representative. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, this term caused a bigger uproar than I ever imagined it would. And I believe that our intent was that the presiding officer would limit people in terms of how long they would be allowed to talk and who would be allowed to talk, and would the presiding officer of a council meeting would control that public speaking and in terms of extending it if necessary to allow everybody to speak. The council knows what the council does. I don't presume to know what the council does, but if this is going to create such a problem for them, and they pretty much almost all are against it, I am not one to get involved in this, and I freely think we should just eliminate it from our proposed changes.
Thank you. Peter, any other discussion?
I would echo Peter's words. I think that our intent was to allow everybody to have a representative to come and address them if they could not. But if it becomes a nightmare logistically, well, then I think it should be removed.
Okay, and if I could, then I would agree. And especially what we were trying to do was to be sure that there was time to hear from the public at the council. And we did specifically hear that there were times that people did not have an opportunity to speak because the current charter says it's reserved for 30 minutes. And what we were trying to do is expand the time should the council want, and at the council president's discretion, to make sure that they could hear from the public. And in doing so, it was brought to our attention that some people might be intimidated. So since those words don't change what we were trying to do, and I think that they created some misunderstanding, I would certainly go along with that. Any other discussion? Then I will try your minds. All in favor of the motion, which would eliminate the term authorized representative from section 3-4, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Then if we could, very little discussion tonight on item 3, the acceptance of donations to the City of Danbury 4-2. If I could, we have language from Mr. Gottschalk that I will pass out to the members. And if you remember, we had a few issues that came up regarding this. The dollar amount, number 1, and the language regarding in-kind services. And if you notice at the bottom, that is the language that Mr. Gottschalk incorporated in this. And there is specific language that the mayor shall report the acceptance of each gift, donation, bequest at its regularly scheduled meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Has everything.
I will entertain a motion. Mrs. Mead.
I move that we accept the language in section 4-1.
4-2.
Well, the 2 is...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Used to be. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
We accept the proposed language and have the donations provided for as stated in the new motion.
Okay. A motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll try your minds. All in favor of accepting the language as submitted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Well, this is easy, guys. Number 4 on our list, filling interim vacancies of elected officials, section 2-6. May I have a motion?
I make a motion that we retain the current wording and forward our report as originally written.
Okay, a motion's been made and seconded that we maintain our current language. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Swenson, discussion.
This particular section of the charter has caused me great consternation in terms of understanding what the objections were to our changes. And people have used words like politics or politician, and isn't that what everybody is if they're elected? I mean, there's nothing wrong with those words. I mean, a politician is simply a student in the art of government, as I had to look up and learn at a very young age. But this leaves the council, this language, with the role of filling its vacancies. And the council's in charge of that. And if the council doesn't want to do it, then, or if the majority takes advantage of a minority in that situation, that is a council problem and a council issue, which disenfranchises, and that word has been used a lot, a particular group of citizens in Danbury. I think that our language was meant to streamline this process, allow at least 2 meetings for the council to fill a vacancy, by extending it from 40 to 60 days, and I see no problem with the language that we submitted.
Okay. Other discussion?
Nope. Said it nicely.
Okay. Hearing no other discussion, I will try your minds. All in favor of accepting our language as submitted in 2-6, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. All right, section 7-8, special assessments. I think another place where we thought we did a wonderful thing and created all kinds of issues and concerns. The council recommended that we remove section 7-8. That says remove section. I think it means remove the language, our new language in there.
That's what it was. The question was to remove the whole thing or remove just the changes.
Okay, and it has been explained to us by Mr. Gottschalk. The fact is there's ordinances that cover that. We were simply bringing the charter up to speed, but people are concerned about it, and the council's recommended that we remove it. Do I have a motion?
I have a motion that we retain the language of the original charter and disregard the changes that were made.
Okay, so the motion's been made.
Correct.
That section 7-8 be retained. Mr. Gottschalk.
Bear in mind there are some other changes to 7-8 that are unrelated to the problematic language.
Technical changes?
Yes. And also, the reference in 7-8 that talks about these other kinds of projects, neither sewer nor water, but public improvements generally,
Right.
also appears in 7-10, is it? I believe. So
Yeah.
if you could just, Commissioner King, if you could just modify your motion a little bit.
Happy to.
To remove just that section.
To remove
The section.
In 7-8.
in 7-8. The underlined portion of 7-8, is that what we're saying at the
Yes.
bottom?
Beginning with all
References to
costs.
public improvement might do
Public
it for us.
improvement. So done.
Okay.
And similarly with respect to those
Section
references in
7-10, and it's specifically the underlying sections of 7-8, the
Where it
public
says subject to the
improvement,
provisions of.
and 7-10, the public,
So the motion regards the language regarding public improvement, right?
Yes.
So we're clear on that.
okay?
In both.
And is everyone clear on
7-10
where we are in the
and 7.
charter in the two sections? Discussion.
Rick, what does it put it back to? What are we at
Where do we
now?
put this
If this passes?
You'll just be left with a section that addresses assessments of benefits to property owners whose properties are specially benefited as a result of improvements to sewer or water.
The way it is now.
Which is the way it was now. We're going to change some other things, I think, dealing with the name of the common council.
Right.
But by and large, that's the thing.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. The Brooks can go home now. You're free. Okay. Let's talk about number 6, limits on non-referendum bonding, section 7-10. We've heard a lot of discussion on this.
I have an idea about a percentage.
Let me tell you.
Good night.
You don't want to hear it.
For the folks that are sitting here, I will tell you, we started with a program that the bond council thought was the most brilliant thing they ever heard. It went by a formula that only a NASA scientist could have figured out, but it would have given us a flexible bonding schedule that Mr. King came up with.
An affordable bond.
That's right. It almost got seconded. Then we came up with, and for quite some time, no annual limits because we expected council to spend all this money without coming back to us, and we ended up compromising, and that has now been sent back to us. So, council says 1 million and 2.5 cap.
No.
Can we have some discussion about
I think
that?
they just referred it back to us.
They referred it back to us.
No dollar amounts.
There was no dollar amount in the vote.
They just said.
Your
go back
discussion
to
was
the
around
committee.
1.0 and 2.5.
Right.
I stand corrected. Thank you. Let's talk about this. How do you want to go about doing this? Do you want to put in...
Well, I think that we can all agree that the annual cap is an important component of this. So that concept is acceptable to everybody. And the question will be what the amount is of the annual cap and what the amount is of any specific project. And we will have a debate about that. I think this, I think that, we studied this language, we looked at the capital budget, we looked at projects that have been pending in the city of Danbury, and then we chose, and through the work of a commissioner who's not here, we looked at the language of other charters and other municipalities across the state of Connecticut, and we discovered that quite a few of them have no provision at all for public referendum on bonding issues, and we learned a lot about that. And I thought we made a very reasonable compromise where big projects would go before the voters, any big projects, any big commitments, and things that happen in the course of time, that a roof goes in the course of time, or things fall apart in the course of time, could be addressed in the same course of time without waiting to be packaged with a bond proposal. And we looked at that kind of deliberately. So I know we got input from the public, or at least the people who appeared regularly before us, opposing that issue. But I thought that we went about it in a systemic way, because I thought that what we heard from the people who are in city government is a reluctance on their part to propose things to go to bonding, small things. And that was the problem we were trying to tackle. I was very happy with our compromise. Perhaps we should tweak the number down a little bit, but I don't think I would be hard pressed to go down to $1 million per project. and limit us to $2.5 million a year. I mean, if we're going to tweak it down, I would want to go down to maybe $4 million a year cap and $2 million a project, which is a marginal change at best.
Does your position change if it's a 2-year term versus a 4-year term?
I make this proposal based on an assumption of a 2-year term, because, I mean, we all talk, we've heard the word accountability, and we've listened to that for almost 18 months now. The ultimate accountability, the ultimate yes or no is our 2-year election cycle, where the voters get to come out and vote. And so, you know, if there's going to be a 2-year term, I'm all for this change of bonding to keep it, you know, at an amount that's either $2.5 million per project and $5 million, or $2 million or $4 million, but not much more below that.
What if it's 4 years?
If it's 4 years, I think that we would probably want to have a cap of around $2.5 million a year total.
Do you want to discuss terms before we discuss bonding?
I think they can be separate.
You mean the order we discuss them?
Yes, if
They should
the
be
length
discussed
of,
separately, but I mean...
but if the length of term would determine how you feel about bonding, we can do, since I arbitrarily chose this one first, we could do terms first.
I would prefer to do terms first.
You know, can I add a comment?
Sure.
You know, I think terms can be excluded from the conversation on caps and dollar amounts, because in the end, we're only talking a few $1 million.
Right.
I mean, that's not a substantial amount of money if you look at the total investment in the city in a budget of $200 million. You know, and I agree with everything that Peter has said about supporting the limit on this. We've discussed this, and I think what we've come up with was the right answer. But I got to tell you, I worry. And what my worry is we've heard so much from the public and so much from the Common Council and others that if this goes to a referendum and the dollar amounts are substantial, it will be voted down. And then we're going to be stuck with $500,000. And we are going to end up handcuffing the Common Council when the attempt was not to do so. You know, we can sit here and pull numbers out of the air. I think the logic that we put on this, Peter, was right. You and I debated this issue back and forth a number of times, and we finally reached what I thought was a satisfactory answer. You know, I'd ask this commission to consider something that the President of the Common Council presented to us tonight, and that is forget the project amount. Put an annual cap and set it at a reasonable level. And to that, I would entertain that maybe $3 million is an annual cap. That'll allow us to do things, and if a project is $2 million, they can go and do a $2 million project, or they can do a $3 million project. But if you just have a cap of $3 million, there is no restraint on a per project basis. So if a roof is, you know, 1.8 million instead of 1.4 million, you can do it. So the intent is there to provide the flexibility to the administration and to the Common Council, and yet there is a cap there that the public can maybe understand at $3 million. You know, is 3 million versus 5 million, you know, I don't know if that's any more or any less palatable, but I think in this environment, surely if we go with what we have, we run the risk of it being voted down, and you know, we haven't given them the tools that we should.
Comments? Paul?
Rick? Splitting out, this thing is more of a question. Educate me about splitting out questions on the ballot. What does that mean, and how does that work? And what's the consequence?
The council, what the statute says is that the amendments, the charter amendments, can be put to the voters in one or more questions.
And if they reject one? Or
it depends on how they're packaged, of course, but...
Right. I mean, if they split this one out, let's say.
For purposes of our conversation about bonding, they could make it a separate question on the ballot. Shall Section 7-10 be amended to read as follows? And then it stands or falls on its own weight without bringing anything else with it, up or down.
But we don't decide that. The
No.
council decides that.
Right.
How does everyone feel about these limits at this point?
We should vote for terms first.
I don't really think that terms should make any difference in how much money we're allotting for someone to spend.
If you need the money, you need the money. What does it have to do with
Yeah, I
terms?
would be willing to make it an annual cap rather than have a per project, and I would be willing to lower it from the 5.
Okay, does anyone want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we eliminate the wording with regard to per project and put in an annual cap of $3 million
For non-referendum.
for non-referendum funding. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, a motion's been made that we make it an annual cap of $3 million, no per project language. Is there a second? Second by Dr. Cronin. Discussion.
I could probably live with that. I think it's low. I think Commissioner King makes a good observation about the sentiment, both in the council and at least the people who've come before us and the council and spoke about it. I think we've kind of tied the hands of the council a little bit and the city officials going forward with $3 million a year, but it's better than it is now.
Right. I don't like it, Peter, but, you know, I think to run the risk of having it voted down is the greater factor here.
To have it go back to 500,000 is
Right.
useless.
And that's what would happen.
Am I the only one here that thinks $3 million is too high?
Yes.
Okay.
Figure that out.
All right, any more discussion?
How about 2.99999?
2.98.
You do it psychologically. I see no more discussion. I will try your minds. All in favor of changing the language, eliminating the per project dollar limit, and putting an annual cap on the bonding in Section 7-10 at $3 million as an annual cap, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Leader,